Hey, it's news from heaven. Today we're going to be talking about how angels' minds and humans' minds are similar. Are you a human being? Well, FYI, something about the way your mind operates is the same as how an angel's mind does. This is the opportunity for us to arm ourselves with the kind of knowledge that can remind us of the potential of life. Because if you are living life, you may have noticed, you did say you were human, so you've probably got the same problems I do, which is life has a way of getting you down. Well, there's a lot of stuff that we need to feel like we need to stress about. There are a lot of times when we are receiving critiques from ourselves or sometimes from other people saying that we're not really of very much value, or we have some kind of deep-seated issues or something we need to be guilty about. These sorts of things that, sure, it's good to do a little self-reflection and notice where we have some issues, but this is not how it usually operates. It's usually debilitating, it's crippling, it's all that stuff. Quit a little reminder that we, in fact, you think of the most beautiful thing in the world, a stick-person angel, and we think of an angel as this like enlightened, amazing experience. Oh, we're already doing that. Something down here is already operating at the same level as it does up there. Can we, by exploring this, and by exploring the Swedenborg stuff in general, you always get this cool buffet of spiritual food. Can that lift us up? And what can it teach us that we can use in our life as we go? Okay, those are the questions. Hey, would you like and subscribe? Do you like this show? Do you subscribe to this show? Please do. Leave comments. Let me know how this is working for you, what it does for you. We begin in Last Judgment. Another argument. Good, we're arguing already. I love arguing. To support the fact that heaven comes from the human race, or from humankind, sorry, I kind of preempted myself, is that angelic minds and human minds are very much alike. There you have it. Angelic minds and human minds are not just like there's one thing, they're both gray. They're very much alike. And just a little context note, so we're here, if you look above, Swedenborg is making arguments to counteract. There was a notion rampant in Christianity, which in his day, which is still around today, and you'll find it in various forms, that there's angels and people are not going to become angels. That angels are a separate thing, and the best you can hope for is like you could be friends with angels. And Swedenborg is saying that even you go have a near-death experience, these beings of light come and talk to you, and they're full of love, and it's the most awesome thing. That's the point of us. We're getting to be that. So he's saying, look, another reason y'all could have known that this is true, that this is the pathway we're on, is that, and I don't know how you would have known this, people and angels have similar minds. Both enjoy the faculties of understanding, perception, and will. Swedenborgianese for, okay, we can grasp concepts, we can recognize when we hear something that is true, and what we love makes us who we are. Both are formed to be receptive to heaven. Since the human mind is just as capable of wisdom as the angelic mind is. You're just as capable of running as an Olympic sprinter. A human mind is just as capable of wisdom as the angelic mind is. So it's not that we've got our human mind here and it's got its limitations and we just got to get rid of it and then we get like a shiny angel mind if you've been good. These two things are the same. They have the same capability to receive wisdom. Wisdom being the way to live that puts you in this angelic zone. However, the reason the mind... this reminds me, there's an issue with that. You can't say that my mind and an angel's mind are the same at receiving wisdom. I don't know anything. If angels are this confused and this lame and repetitive and... small-minded. If I'm packing what an angel does, then if an angel appears and is like, I'm going to help you, here's what you should do. I was like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. So what's the difference? Why are we feeling so limited and closed in when we are just as capable of wisdom as the angelic mind is? However, the reason the mind is not as wise in this world is that it lives in an earthly body. No offense to our wonderful earthly bodies. How does that affect us? In such a body, our spiritual mind does its thinking in an earthly way. Because spiritual thinking, which we possess just as angels do, flows down into earthly concepts that correspond to spiritual ones and becomes perceptible to us in that way. It took a lot of willpower, but I didn't stop in the middle of that sentence. Now, we will stop a lot. In such a body, our spiritual mind does its thinking in an earthly way. So what you seem to have here is there's our spiritual mind, which we already represented with this gorgeous yellow circle. So I'm not going to touch that. I mean, don't mess with a classic, right? But we have a body here, that mind is plugged into a body. And when it does, the output is thinking. So it, through this filter, I just was watching water go through a coffee filter. So through this filter, the thinking comes down into consciousness. That we'll say this little box is our consciousness. So this mind ends up thinking, even though it's got, its yellowness, it ends up thinking in an earthly way because of the earthly body it's in. That the mind, the brain, obviously the brain is involved in thought. When this is something that people who say there is no soul apart from the body will say, look, we know that we're entirely physical because when you poke this part of the brain, that changes how you think. When this part gets damaged, that changes how you think. The brain and thinking go together. When you concentrate on a certain thing or try to remember something, this part lights up. You can't just say there's this soul somewhere that does the thinking. The brain does the thinking. And Swedenborg was fascinating in saying that the mind, there is a spirit that's consciousness. That solves the hard problem of consciousness that we still can't seem to figure out. But it is not just interfacing at one point, but interfacing at every single point with the body. So the spiritual mind is plugged into the mechanism of the brain. He doesn't say that exactly here, but I think that's what's implied, and uses that structure to do its thinking, and thus thinks in an earthly way. And listen, I didn't have to say that. This diagram is self-evident right here, isn't it? Was that like a weird cyclops? Because our spiritual thinking, which we possess just as angels do, this to me means something. We have, you think of the thoughts of angels, we are doing that thinking. And this gets down to, you're going to see here, and particularly here, like who are we? Are we the observer? If we can be thinking on the level angels do, but that flows down into earthly concepts that correspond to spiritual ones and becomes perceptible to us. So there's a part of us that's unconscious, a part of us that's conscious. It's very complicated as to what exactly are we, which is no different than, when you have somebody say, okay, which are you? Are you the thought, or are you the observer, or are you the brain that made the thought, but you don't know how those neurons and stuff fire to get there, so you weren't privy to that process, but you are it's a complicated thing, being a human being, even before you add all this Swedenborg kind of stuff to it. Flows down into earthly concepts that correspond to spiritual ones. Now this is the key, and then I promise we'll leave this sentence, we'll go off into the open fields of other sentences. Flows down into earthly concepts, wow, go green there, earthly concepts that correspond to spiritual ones. So there's these spiritual thoughts that are occurring, but these are not the kind of things that the us will say. If this is our current conscious field, it can't process that. We can't think. The conscious part, can't get that yet. Where it's like trying to explain, ontological differences, or like culture to a 2-year-old. They just can't think like that. Or trying to explain, I'm trying to think of what a 2-year-old can't really get. There's a lot of stuff, but obviously I don't think much higher than 2-year-olds, so I'm not going to come up with an example, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's just stuff that they just don't have the faculty to do that. That's how it is with these. Even Swedenborg would go up there, traveling out of the body and say, man, I was thinking these things when I was out of my body, that then I came back into the body, tried to think those things, and I just couldn't. It's like when at the end of a dream, when you just, what was it about? I can't quite describe it. So these concepts need to come directly down through the earthly mind into a filter that we can understand and that can interface with the world around us. Because Swedenborg says that the spiritual world doesn't have space and time like we do, yet everything we think about, he says, on an earthly level has the idea of space and time. There's one thing, how long will something take? How far away is something? That's in everything, but yet it's not in the spiritual world. So we have to have it in the right, like, why bring it down into these little green balls? It's because it has to be in the right form that will allow us to navigate the world that we're in. There's the world. There's the continents. So that is, we're same mechanism as angels, but we're needing it for a different environment. So it's filtered down. It's focused on what's around us. It is different, though, when our mind is released from its ties to the physical body. This will be death. Then we do not think in an earthly fashion anymore, but think spiritually. And when we think spiritually, we have thoughts that are incomprehensible and inexpressible to the earthly self. That is, we think like angels. And this was to Swedenborg very obvious, because he was able to make that transition, if you believe what he's writing, and experience that he himself could be in that angelic mode and then come back into the body. It's not just when you die, then you get some kind of upgrade. That it's there now. And I know I've talked to people that have had near-death experiences or some kind of profound spiritual experience where they are out there and they're in a tunnel or they see God or they see angels, and they come back into the body, and then they know, oh, I was in this much higher state, and now I'm back in this. Sometimes they can't quite retain all the information they got, but it wasn't that they were there and they felt like, wow, when I finally die permanently, then I'll really have this state. It was they were there and it was happening already. They've got these huge information downloads. Life is expansive. Everything is great. So for what it's worth, and it may not feel like it's worth anything to you, just know when the clouds of life are getting you down and it seems like you're so limited and there's nothing else out there, we are already, a certain part of us is flying free up here. And it comes into our consciousness from time to time, but we are already hanging out on the angelic plane, even if you wouldn't know it by being us. We can tell from this that our inner self, which is called our spirit, is in its essence an angel. One last note to tell your negative clouds when they come at you is that you are already an angel. In a sense, we are still doing work here. There's the whole process of regeneration is to get the evils out that keep us from being here. That's why earthly life there's a point to it. But I do think it's worth saying that that's the potential. That is the stakes here. However, does that mean everybody's just an angel? Then what's the point? And what about if I don't love anyone and I'm really bad, or somebody else is? On angels being in a perfect human form, see Heaven and Hell 73-77. Download that book for free, just like you download this one for free. When our inner self is not opened upward, however, but only downward, then although it is still in a human form after it's released from the body, that form is dreadful and demonic. This is because it cannot look up toward heaven, only down toward hell. So that's the issue. It's not even that it's the limited nature of focusing on. It's not that you can't love the kinds of things like reputation or feeling of gratification, but if that's all you've got and there's no moral compass on those things and you don't care who you hurt to get those, then we're in trouble. Then you're only looking to hell instead of being able to know both and focus on heaven. That's what makes your spirit, which here it might seem like that's not a big difference. You got good motives, you got bad motives. But there we're saying, this affects how you look and who you are and all that stuff. So focus up. The church, and here we go. This whole thing, if you happen to like arguments about how you could have known this, we get from the Bible, I was going to say. We get people on this channel, on YouTube, who will come and argue and say, look, this is not what Christianity teaches. There's plenty of people that come to our channel that don't really have an affiliation with Christianity and don't feel like they need to interface with that. But there's other people who, seeing a lot of Swedenborg's more Christian terminology, will want to engage through that route. They're both good ways to get into it. But we get people who say, look, this is not, you can't just say people can become angels or that people are awake right after death in heaven. No, they go sit in the ground till judgment day. People really do come after us with this. And this was obviously true in Swedenborg's day when this was all there was. And he's saying, look, you could have known that the Bible says this too. It's not just experience. The Bible says it too. The church could have known from the word that heaven and hell come from humankind, and could have made this part of its teachings if it had let in some light from heaven, and taken note of the Lord's words to the criminal, that today he would be with him in paradise. Do you know that story? So there's these 3 crosses, right? You may see these, on church displays and things. This is one of my favorite verses in the Bible, bar none. Is like, so Jesus is in the middle here. And there's 2 people who are all, crucifixion was this gruesome form of justice back in the day. So you could get crucified for things. And so there was 2 criminals beside Jesus that were getting crucified. And one of them on the right says, hey, if you're really God, just get us off of here. Use your God power to get us off. And then the other one says, don't you even fear God, knowing that we are under the same condemnation, and we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. For some reason, I get goosebumps when I say it. And Swedenborg does say that particular communities of angels are linked up with particular verses in the Bible. So it could well be that for some reason I'm a fan of that community. But he says, then he turns to Jesus and says, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And I know that could just sound like, help, I need help, and I'm in this terrible pain, get me out of it, and it is about justice. But to me, it's something different. It's something about, I'm going to take care of you, even though it's in this extreme situation. And Jesus says to him, today you're going to be with me in paradise. Today. And Swedenborg here is saying, look, Jesus is talking to that guy, and literally he's saying, look, it's hard right now. But in just an hour or 2, it's going to be over, and we're going to be happy in heaven. So that you'd think that would be enough for people to realize, yes, the providence and God's guiding, but this whole do we die right away? Do we go to heaven right away, or do we have to wait in the ground somewhere? But I remember having a conversation with somebody who it says, today you will be with me in paradise, and this person was saying that doesn't mean that there's life after death immediately, because the comma is supposed to be, I say to you today, comma, you will be with me in paradise. And he was very adamant about this. I looked up all the translations, it's not in there. The comma is always in that spot. He's like, no, he just meant, I say to you today, I'll be with you in paradise. Which is like, to get that nitpicky about it, and to think that that's the idea, that makes me wonder about this light from heaven. What is this light from heaven that he's saying needs to be augmenting? It's not just that you can dig into text and argue about it. What is this light from heaven? And we're going to get a little more about that, I think, right down here. Don't read ahead to that. It could have noted the church could have noted what the Lord said about the rich man and Lazarus, that the rich man went to hell and spoke from there to Abraham, and that Abraham was in heaven. We could have another show about that, but just saying, look, people are already in these afterlife destinations, and what the Lord said to the Sadducees about the resurrection, that God is not the God of the dead, but the living. Okay, there's your biblical stuff. Some people really need that. Other people, why are you citing it so much? Look at what he says here about another way we could have known this is how it is. It could also have considered the belief common to all people who are living good lives, especially the belief that they have when they are nearing death and are no longer preoccupied with worldly and physical concerns. They believe they are about to enter heaven as soon as they leave their bodily life. This is just almost common knowledge. This is why you see it now in pop culture and all over. And when people, and I have been around dying people, and they are talking about, I'm going somewhere. This is people. You just believe that. You instinctively believe that. And Swedenborg actually says that he likens God to a sun, blasting out, and says that the belief that there is a God, and the belief that we live, the belief that we live after death, these very basic beliefs That looks kind of cool, going over the text there. Those actually emanate out, and instinctively we know that they're true. This is also why we make these instinctive connections between correspondence. Like we'll say, I see, when we understand something, which that's actually a correspondence, because understanding and seeing are different things, but we just put them together because there's this instinctive knowledge that there is this spiritual connection between those two. He's saying, look, that you can complicate it. You can get this doctrine that messes it up and makes it into something. But if you just, there's a spiritual gut instinct that this is what we do. And I wonder if this is connected to this light from heaven. That it's just, and it's not just knowledge. It's got a moral component. Like, this is how it should be. So that's how it is. This is the predominant view we all have. And it's cool that he's reaching down. You don't have to be like this tricky theologian. You can actually confuse yourself more. You just get it. Except at those moments when we are basing our thinking on the church's teaching regarding resurrection at the time of the last judgment, it's, if we get into this doctrine, we can snuff out that light. Ask people whether this is the case or not, and you will see. Anyone well informed about the divine design can understand that we were created to become angels, because the final step in the divine design is us. See number 9 above, which is cool. In us, something of heavenly and angelic wisdom can take form, become whole, and multiply. Take form, become whole, and multiply. These are the essential elements. Why do anything on this level? In the first place, the divine design never stops halfway down and forms something there that has no outermost aspect. You have God, you have these levels, you have celestial, you have spiritual, you have, let's say we're down here on the natural level. Why don't we just get everything done up here where it's freer and easier? That what the divine design does is goes all the way out to the outermost, and this happens in organisms, this happens in everything, builds on that level, and then from there populates the upper levels. Such a thing would not be in a full or complete state unless you have all these levels working together. It's not a complete thing. No, it goes on until it reaches what is outermost. When it comes to its outermost point, it takes on a form there, uses substances that are gathered there to make itself whole, becomes productive, which is accomplished by various forms of procreation. This is why the seedbed of heaven is on the outermost level. Meaning, this is a picture of, here's God, here's the human race. Why is it that new human beings are created here? And this ties into it's actually humans, and in the broadest sense, populating heaven and hell, these layers, because why have us be made way out here? Why aren't we in here and we have childhood here, then come out to it's because that is the divine design, that it gets you out here. There's a procreating system out here that then fills in the innermost so that they're all united as a whole. This is the meaning of what is said in the first chapter of Genesis about humanity and its creation. God said, "Let us make humanity in our image, according to our likeness." And God created humanity in his image. In the image of God he created it, male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply." To create people in the image of God and in the likeness of God is to supply them with all the elements of the divine design, from first to last, and thereby make them angels at the deeper levels of their minds. That we have similar minds to angels because angels have gone through this process too. Angels have begun, even if they had a very short life here, on the physical plane and thinking physically, getting those first rudiments there. And then from that, we move inward, pulling everything that's positive from here, building a foundation, and on top of that, we can live in the house that we get spiritually forever. And that's the news from heaven. So, how does it feel? You are, an angel in training. Right now, we're laying down the levels we need to lay down to move up above the clouds to where there is sun and happiness. So, did that make any sense to you? Did you feel like you got something out of it? Leave comments. Let me know, what is it? What does this trigger in you that I didn't think of? Let the other people read it. Sharing is caring. It really does. We get these ideas. They're strange. They need to be processed. How did you process it? What did you find? Like and subscribe. That would mean a lot to me. I am so thankful that I get to talk like this, and you guys are willing to think through it with me. I like to hear your input, to learn from it, and then we apply it to the point, which is yeah, let's get going. Let's get these layers together. Let's get this angelic mindset and see what's possible. How much more can we open ourselves up to this angelic potential while we're here? That seems like an experiment worth doing. Okay, see you soon.